Podcast City Network.
What is up, guys? Welcome to episode 141 of the Nest Podcast. I'm your boy, Brandon. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, Zach. Zach, what's up, my man?
How's it going?
It's going, man. We had a good weekend full of all kinds of craziness in the sports world. Of course, I want to kick it off with one of the craziest things that I've seen in a long time, and that, of course, was the Jake Paul Ben Askren fight. We're going to get into the power rankings. We're going to get into the MLB standings and all that stuff, but I just have to pick your brain about this one a little bit. I'm sure by now we've all seen the highlights. We've all seen what transpired from this fight. What did you think? Do you think Ben Askren really got knocked out, or do you think that it was a flop?
Boy, it's hard to tell. I want to say a guy like that wouldn't just flop, but at this point in his career, clearly he was doing this for money and for just views in general. I wouldn't be surprised if it did come out that he kind of just took this one to help Jake Paul out and make some money, because it sure did look that way. We've all seen the fight with him and Robbie Lawler, and he ate punches. And if you're going to sit there and tell me that Jake Paul somehow hits harder than Robbie Lawler, I don't know, because his resume doesn't really say that to me. Anything can happen, like we've said, but I don't know. This one's questioning for sure.
Yeah, I was actually going to make that same point about the Robbie Lawler fight, because he ate some bombs in that fight, and Robbie was teeing off. Robbie's one of the heaviest handed UFC fighters in that weight class that we've seen. So for him to just tee off, the only difference is Jake Paul was standing and was able to put his entire weight into it, whereas Ruthless Robbie was on the ground punching and was just using straight arm power. That's the only big difference that I've been able to see between the two. But yeah, to your point, Ben Askren's he's had a tough chin in UFC, and that's using a lot smaller gloves and getting hit quite a bit. He also got dumped on his head and survived that. So I mean, it's weird. But one thing that I do know is that Trillest Fight Club is definitely going to have to step their game up after the roasting that they took on Twitter fight night, because it seemed like they were trying to promote more of a concert atmosphere than a fight. And for $49.99, fight fans aren't going to keep tuning in if they're just going to keep promoting crappy music.
Yeah, that's such a weird organization anyway. They put on these ridiculous like celebrity boxing matches and weird stuff. And like you said, half of it or more is concerts. And if you're a fight fan, you want to see the fight, or fights. You don't want to see concerts. You go to a concert to see a concert. It's kind of a weird mixing of two different worlds. I guess I kind of get what they're doing, like, because I'm sure they only have a select amount of people that are willing to go on their pay-per-view to fight anyway, so they got to fill up some time with something. But yeah, I can't imagine if they throw another one out there with some YouTubers that are going to fight. I can't imagine many people are going to buy it.
Well, and to that point, they're going to do that because they've been successful so far. Who do you think will be next for Jake Paul? Or I guess Logan Paul was fighting his own fights too, but for Jake Paul specifically, who do you think is going to step up to challenge him next? He's already beat another YouTuber. He's already beat an NBA basketball player, and now he's beat an MMA fighter. Who's next?
I think he should definitely fight someone that has actual boxing experience and is an actual boxer instead of just some other thing. Dylan Dennis has come out and said that he wants to fight. I don't know. Who knows what's going to come of that? Because I think people that are they have a voice on the internet kind of take these things as a way of promoting themselves. So maybe that's Dylan's angle here. But if it were me and I were Jake Paul, and if he's serious about this, I would look for an opponent that's an actual boxer, because then you could prove to people, hey, I knocked out a couple people and I can do it against a actual boxer too.
Right. I think that's the avenue that he should be trying to approach. I know Adam sent us a pretty funny text earlier that was talking basically MMA math, saying that since he's beat Askren now, then it went down the line, and it was like, okay, so now he ideally would match up against the heavyweight champion in the UFC, Francis Ngannou. The path to get there is pretty funny, because it's this guy beat this guy, which beat this guy, which beat that guy. So I don't know. Francis Ngannou, what do you think? Knock him out?
Yeah. He could probably just touch him on the nose and knock him out.
It's funny. A lot of people are saying that fight was reminiscent of when Hulk Hogan beat Kevin Nash for the WCW heavyweight champion, and it became known as the finger poke of doom whenever he just put the finger on his chest and Kevin Nash flopped. I don't know. It is what it is. I know Ben Askren had a big smile on his face, and he ended up with a pretty good purse out of the fight anyway. So maybe it was just for a little bit of publicity for him. I'm sure he's got some kind of YouTube channel in his own right, because he's a funky, kind of crazy guy. I'm sure he's got his own little take and his own little space on the internet where he has his persona going wild. So it's interesting to see.
Yeah, for sure.
But let's get into it, Zach. We're about 2 weeks into the MLB season now, and I don't know about you, but I'm having a good time.
I'm having a good time because baseball is fun nonetheless, but your team is doing a lot better than mine. We'll say that.
Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit. But I want to start off with the National League West. We kicked off our spring training previews with the National League West because it had the defending champions, the LA Dodgers, and they are off to arguably the hottest start of any team in Major League Baseball at 13-3. We talked about it whenever we had the guys on from Locked On Dodgers and Locked On Padres, that the Dodgers were going to be the team to beat out West, and it certainly looks like that's the case. And I just wonder how much they're going to win this division by. They're already up 3.5 games. The Giants and the Padres are tied in second place, essentially at 3.5 back. So the Dodgers are just going to keep making that interval grow. Do you see anybody being able to catch them out there in the West?
It's going to be super difficult. It seems like the only team that gives them any kind of competition is the Padres.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see them winning the overall division. So I think in 2 weeks' time, the Dodgers have basically locked up that division, barring any sort of like crazy slew of injuries or something. Even if they have a couple people go down, they've got such a huge stacked roster that I think they'll be okay. Yeah, I could see them riding the entire season at that number one spot.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Padres giving them fits. Like, they played this past weekend. How in the world was that not the Sunday night baseball game?
They screwed that up.
MLB, man, like, you're trying to get eyes on the product. You're trying to go out there and make people interested in your sport. And you've got the hottest rivalry in the game right now, and you're not even going to put it on your premier network show on primetime TV. It's going to have to be like, oh, well, you have to have MLB TV to even watch it. And it's like, come on, MLB, figure it out.
The only thing I can say to that is the Dodgers and Padres are playing next week on Sunday Night Baseball. So maybe their thinking was they didn't want to stack up 2 weeks in a row, but I don't get that. Like you said, this rivalry is the hottest thing right now in baseball. People would love to watch this game, and I think MLB fans went out of their way to go watch it.
Well, yeah, MLB fans did go out of their way, and last night was the perfect storm for them because the starting pitchers were Trevor Bauer and Blake Snell. Like, it's a premier marquee matchup between starting pitchers that just joined into these teams. And the Padres actually ended up winning last night, so that was even better for that. Fernando Tatis Jr. was back in the lineup. You know, like everything was just perfect for that storm. Next week, who knows what it's going to be? Maybe the fact that it was in San Diego and not LA is why they didn't put it on. But it's the first meeting of the year between these two teams. Like you would think that would be the thing to put on, but I guess we don't work at MLB, so whatever.
Yeah, instead we got to watch the Braves win by like 13 or whatever.
Yeah. I've got several Braves fans that I work with, and I texted one of them, and it was right after the Grand Slam, and I was like, "Well, it looks like you can go to bed early tonight." And he's like, "Yeah, I'm not staying up to watch a blowout." I don't blame you, man. Like, why stay up and sacrifice sleep to watch a blowout of a game? Now, if it was a close like 3-4 game or 5-2 game, even like the Dodgers and Padres was, that's worth staying up and watching the entire time.
Yeah, I totally get that.
Which, I mean, I know you can't predict that whenever you make a schedule. You can't predict a blowout, but I don't know. You mentioned the Cubs. Let's go ahead and move on into the NL Central, where the Cubs are residing in last place. What's going on in Chicago, man?
Yeah, they're not good. And I think it's all across the board. Their starting pitching hasn't been great. Kyle Hendricks got lit up, obviously last night. And yeah, I mean, there's not much more to say about the team. I don't know what it is. I don't know if everyone just kind of has that feel that they're going to be traded or they're going to be just released or whatever to free agency. But it just seems like people are kind of just, I don't know, cashing it in there. There doesn't seem to be very many people that are playing for much. It's kind of weird because they've got several good, talented players who I would imagine would want to at least play for themselves and play for their own stats and try to play for a big contract, but it's just not happening. It's crazy to see. I expected them to at least be average, but dead last is kind of crazy.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. You mentioned these guys playing for their own stats, trying to get a big contract. One of those guys that actually turned down a significant contract was Javi Baez, and he's already struck out 27 times, and he's batting just above the Mendoza line at 214. So he's having a career worst season in a season where he's seeking a huge contract from somewhere else.
Yeah. And it seems like the shortstop market is going to be pretty thin. I mean, you've already got Lindor, who's locked up. You've got Tatis, who's locked up. He's a big ticket item, but like you said, if he has a mediocre season, he's not doing himself any favors.
No, and Xander, I bring him up all the time. What a bargain he is to be on such a cheap contract. You know, it's funny to talk about $100 million as being cheap, but when you look around at these other shortstops around the league, your Lindors, your Tatises, guys like that, Trevor Story, who's about to get paid, and then you look at Xander Bogaerts and realize that he's been the best shortstop in the game since 2017, 18, and he's getting paid chump change compared to the rest of these guys. What a bargain.
Yeah. How do you think that makes him feel? Do you think he kind of is upset by that?
You know, he took a team-friendly deal to stay with the Red Sox. He knew that he was taking a lesser deal than what he could have gotten, but it's all because he's loyal to the team. This is a team that brought him in as a 16-year-old from Aruba that he really didn't have much. You know, I've seen like the documentaries where he grew up playing on a sandlot, on a dirt field with a stick. And now he's playing in Major League Baseball on one of the premier teams in one of the premier stadiums. Why would you want to leave that?
Right. Yeah. And I can totally agree with that. Like, I love the player that is comfortable where he's at. He knows he's in a good environment and a good organization and decides to take a friendly deal. Sure, there's going to be those guys that just want money because it might not be coming around again. But I think there's a big amount of respect that has to go to a guy that does that kind of thing. $100 million is nothing to scoff at. You know, I'm sure that is absolutely life-changing for him and his family and whoever else he wants to help out. So I think he's smart in doing that. I'm sure he could have made $300 million somewhere, but what does that get you? You know what I mean? If you're on a team that is not going to make the playoffs, it's not going to make a World Series run, you're rich, and that's about it.
Yeah. Look at somebody like Nolan Arenado, who signed that huge deal with the Rockies and they were going nowhere. And then he ended up on the trade market. I want to stick with the NL Central because he now plays for your St. Louis Cardinals. And, you mentioned earlier that they're not doing so great. They're sitting just below the 500 mark at 7-8. It's still early. They still have plenty of time to turn it all around. But what's been the struggles that you've seen from the Cardinals this season, Zach?
Starting pitching has been terrible. It's basically Jack Flaherty and Waino, and the rest of the other three are just been terrible. We have gotten KK Kim back at the number 4 spot. He's our lefty, so he'll be good to go, I would assume. But yeah, it sucks because the offense is basically there. They have off nights and on nights. Some nights they score 13, and sometimes they score 0. Not a whole lot you can do about that. I will say that the outfield is a bit of a concern. Harrison Bader has been out, so we've kind of just had to throw Dylan Carlson in at center field. He's normally a right fielder, and then our future second baseman Tommy Edman has to then field right field, and good old Matt Carpenter has to come in at second and just either strike out or hit into the shift or whatever. He did, however, hit his first home run. So I guess he can do something still, but it's not enough to compete. They have a problem with giving the veterans that have the big contracts the playing time. And I don't know if that's a manager's decision or that's something from the front office. Like they are paying him, sure. And I guess maybe they want to try to get as much out of that contract as they can. But by doing that, they're not doing themselves any favors on the win column, because we've lost a lot of series and series that we should have won. But it's kind of crappy right now, just to kind of be, like you said, almost less than mediocre. Hopefully it'll all get turned around. I'm not too scared yet, but boy, I don't think this is what Nolan was envisioning.
No, I don't either, but it's still so early, Zach. Like between first place and last place in the NL Central, it's only 3 games.
Right.
Between first place and second place in the NL West, it's 3.5 games. So that tells you how close the NL Central is. The Cardinals are only 2 games back out of first place right now. It's still April. It's still the beginning of the season. There's no way the Cincinnati Reds are going to stay that hot all season. They've been one of the surprising teams to me. They did have a big opening weekend where they just went out and absolutely bludgeoned the Pirates, which, I mean, it is what it is. The Pirates pitching is lackluster at best. And the Reds went out there and they were just crushing the ball. But I'm wondering now that Nick Castellanos is actually going to have to serve this suspension and all of that, is that going to kind of derail them a little bit? Is that going to slow them down to allow the Brewers and the Cardinals to be able to catch back up in that race?
I definitely think so. He's obviously their premier player. They've got Mike Moustakas and they've got old man Joey Votto. I don't think they have necessarily enough to keep this thing going. Like you were saying, they're off to a hot start, but I expect them to cool off too. Their pitching isn't what it once was. Of course, they still have Luis Castillo, who is good, and that's about it. I'm not sure if Sonny Gray is still there. Is he still in Cincinnati?
I don't think so. I think he's elsewhere. Let me check real quick.
Yeah, I mean, nonetheless, they have a lackluster pitching staff as a whole, bullpen and all. So they have a few good guys, and like we said, Nick Castellanos is probably their best player, and if he's out for 2 games, then that's going to definitely cool them off, I think.
Yeah, let's see. I'm looking for Sonny Gray real quick. Yeah, no, he is in Cincinnati still. So
okay.
He's been bounced around a lot. He was with Oakland for a while, with the Yankees for a bit, and I guess he's still there in Cincinnati. So they do still have him, but he's not the pitcher that he once was.
Yeah,
so
that's what I was going to say too. It's like, yeah, he might be there, but who knows what kind of season he's going to have. So.
Yeah. So I'm with you. I think the Reds are going to cool off. I think they're going to ultimately slip down, and I think it's going to end up being that race that we thought that it would be between the Brewers and the Cardinals. And I'm so pumped. I told you before we came on that Veronica and I just booked our plane tickets up to Milwaukee for September. So we're going to be there at the same time that the Cardinals are playing the Brewers in Milwaukee in September, right in the midst of this playoff push. So I might get to go watch some grade A baseball right there.
Yeah. I think that's going to be awesome. There's nothing like September baseball, maybe other than October baseball, but September's pretty damn good too.
I was looking at tickets already, and I found some that were reasonably priced, and it's down the third base line, which happens to be the visitor side. And Veronica was like, well, why wouldn't you want to sit behind the home team and cheer on the Brewers? It's our last name after all. I was like, because Nolan plays third base.
Yes.
I want to sit closer to where Nolan Arenado is going to be playing because I want to watch that man play third base. Absolutely. I've been saying for a long time that he's one of my favorite players in the entire league, and to get to see him up close and personal is going to be great. I've seen Trout play. I've seen Mookie Betts play. I need to cross Nolan off that list.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I told my wife we're going to at least a few games, and I'm sitting as close to third base as I possibly can.
Yep, that's the way to do it. Let's move on to the NL East, bud. Surprising to me that the New York Mets are sitting atop of the standings. They're only up by one game, but is that kind of shocking that the lackluster New York Mets happen to be a first place team right now?
Yeah, that's very shocking. You would think that the Braves would be up there easily, and of course they're not doing bad, but for whatever reason, I guess the stars have aligned for the Mets to be up there.
The Braves are actually 2.5 games back. They're 7-9 on the season. They, like the Cardinals, have had pitching woes where they don't have good starting pitching, or they'll have decent starting pitching and then the bullpen will crap the bed and give up, the big hits late in the games. The Mets, on the other hand, they have had good starting pitching. They've had Marcus Stroman pitching very well. Jacob deGrom is a madman who goes out there every single game, but their offense has been literally hit or miss, boom or bust for the Mets. And to that point, they've allowed 37 runs this season, and they've scored 37 runs this season. So, it's a flip of the coin if they're going to outscore the other team or not.
Yep.
They have a 0 run differential. The Braves actually have a -2. The only team in that NL East that has a positive run differential is the Miami Marlins, and they're sitting at 7-8. So this NL East, it's going to be something to watch this entire season, because this isn't going to be the final standings. The way that they're sitting now, it's going to get jumbled up several times. I still think Atlanta's going to come out on top in this division.
Yeah, and I don't think it'll be pretty. Like you said, they've got some pitching woes, so they're going to definitely have to try to keep up with runs. I think they can, though. I definitely think that they have enough offensive weapons to kind of keep it moving and just be able to deal with the fact that they don't have great pitchers. Like you said, the Mets probably aren't going to be up there for very long. If you can't at least score enough to back up your pitching, you're screwing yourself. Like you said, you can't make it anywhere with a 0 run differential. That sucks.
No. Yeah, no. You're only going to win so many games if you can't score any runs at all. And I feel so bad for somebody like Jacob deGrom, who goes out there and pitches 6-7 innings scoreless and then gets a no decision or a loss out of the game. It's unheard of for a guy to do that. Get 12 punchies and still lose the game. It's crazy.
Yeah, his team is basically screwing him on his win-loss record.
Yeah. And that's been the whole thing for his entire career. Is he should have about probably 40 to 50 more wins on his resume than what he does. But because the Mets have always not been able to score runs when he's on the mound, he takes a lot of no decisions. He's got great ERA, but he doesn't have that win-loss record to show for it, right. Which is why I think that that's kind of a bum stat whenever you're looking at pitchers to get in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I agree.
But anyway, let's move on to the American League, where there's some more pretty shocking teams out there. And you look no further than the American League West, where the Seattle Mariners are sitting on top. Last year it was the Oakland A's that snuck up and won that division. The Houston Astros have been the kingpins for a little while. They're sitting in 4th place now at 7-8. And the Seattle Mariners are sitting atop, and actually the Los Angeles Angels are kind of right there with them. It's kind of interesting. Two teams that we didn't really expect to be at the top of the heap are controlling their own destiny right now. What do you think about that? Have you been paying attention to anything out west?
I've been paying attention to what Rip Griffin has been tweeting about the Angel or the Astros rather on Twitter, and he's basically kept me in the loop. And the Astros have lost several games and full on series, so they've kind of put themselves in a hole. And on the other side of the coin, the Angels kind of have picked it up, and obviously Mike Trout is off to a great start. Otani is doing well. So that team kind of seems to be, firing on all cylinders. I couldn't speak on why the hell the Mariners are in first place. I haven't watched any of their games or anything. That's just absolutely crazy to me.
Yeah, the Mariners, they're 10-6 right now. But it's funny, they have a -3 run differential. That's not going to be able to sustain for very long. They've won some games, but then they've lost some blowout games. So they're actually on their way to Fenway pretty soon. So we'll see what happens whenever they play the Red Sox, who have been outscoring pretty much everybody. Yeah. Well, that'll be an interesting series to watch because their pitching has been their strong suit as well. And good pitching tends to stifle the Red Sox a little bit, except for today, but we'll get into that. Like you mentioned, Shohei Ohtani, he's been out there balling. That, of course, was my pick for MVP this year. I don't think he's going to be the best hitter in the league. I don't think he's going to be the best pitcher in the league. But when you put the total body of work together, I think that's going to be enough to secure him that MVP award for this season. And your MVP pick, Mike Trout, is being Mike Trout.
Yeah, what you expect. I mean, nothing new there. If you're going to be touted as the greatest player in MLB, then you might as well own up to it. And he has. It's been a good year for him so far.
Yeah, and I expect more of the same. But yeah, the Houston Astros was kind of a shock to me. They're 7-8 on the season. They're the only. Well, no, they're not the only, but they have the biggest run differential in the AL West right now at +6. So I expect them to be able to flip it around a little bit. They've lost some close games. They've lost some games that they probably shouldn't have lost. But it makes me wonder, like without some of those starting pitchers that they had for years. Cole's no longer there. Verlander's been hurt. Now Springer's no longer there. Altuve's kind of lost his stroke a little bit. Bregman's not really played all that well. Is it falling apart in Houston?
It definitely seems that way. That they, like you mentioned, they used to have a huge big three starting pitchers, and they've lost that. Of course,
Keuchel's not there anymore either.
Yeah. Zach Greinke's still around, and he's doing his 51 mile an hour weird throws and stuff. But yeah, it seems to be kind of falling apart there. Like you said, Bregman's just kind of not a non-issue. There's something going on with Carlos Correa. I'm not really following it too closely, but I guess they couldn't get a deal going or whatever. So there might be some weird issues there. And that team, it seems to be at least unraveling, if not completely, blown up at this point.
Yeah, it's going to be something to watch all season long because the two Texas teams down at the bottom of the AL West.
Yep.
In the Central, the Kansas City Royals have jumped out to a quick start, and they're actually holding a 1.5 game lead there over the Cleveland Indians. Did you expect that the Royals would be a first place team after 2 weeks?
No, I definitely did not. And I guess here we are. They've won some games. I don't know if that means that the rest of the teams, maybe other than the White Sox, are kind of crappy that they've been playing. But man, yeah, I definitely didn't expect the Royals to be doing as well as they have. I saw a stat on MLB's Instagram that says the Dodgers and the Royals are the only teams that have not lost a series yet, which is crazy. I definitely expect that from the Dodgers, but the Royals is a shock.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Dodgers are 13-3, we said, and the Royals are 9-5. So they've barely squeaked by on some of those, I'm sure. Yeah. They've got a +3 run differential, which is good for 4th place in the American League Central. So they're not scoring a lot of runs. So they're obviously relying heavily on quality pitching, getting them over. I know Andrew Benintendi, who went over from the Boston Red Sox in the offseason, he's had a terrible year in his first season there in Kansas City. So it looks like Heim Bloom won another one there because somebody that showed so much promise is now not really being the player that he was once touted that he could be. And I think a big part of the reason that you're not seeing the teams like the Chicago White Sox and the Minnesota Twins up there in that first place mix is because both of them have had to play the Boston Red Sox this year, and the Red Sox are hot. Moving into the American League East, where the Red Sox are sitting on top of that mountain with a record of 11-6. Get this, their run differential is plus 28. That is the biggest run differential in the American League and only second in Major League Baseball to the LA Dodgers. So these guys are putting up runs, they're scoring a lot, and they've had pretty good pitching to back them up. So if that's sustainable, then these Red Sox, they're going to win a lot of ball games.
Yeah, that's unreal, especially coming from that 0-3 start to the Orioles, for them to just absolutely turn it around. That's crazy. I expected them to do well, maybe second, third place, but man, they've ran away with it. And I don't think it'll be that drastic throughout the whole season, but definitely they're in a good spot right now for sure.
Yeah, you talk about running away with it. Separating first place and last place in the American League East is 5 games. And ironically, the last place team there in that American League East is a team that most people, including us, predicted would win the American League East by the end, and that's the New York Yankees. They're sitting at 5-10 on the season, which if you're a Yankees fan, that is beyond terrible. That sky is falling. That is end of the world type news right there for them to be 5-10. What do you think has been the major issue that the Yankees have encountered this season, Zach?
Well, definitely pitching. I think you can't just rely on Garrett Cole to be good.
He only pitches once every 5 days, so
exactly. And you paid him a whole lot of money. Granted, the Yankees are not above paying and overpaying. And then, of course, you've got the injury bug that always seems to hit that team. Aaron Judge has been out for a few games, and they have to be all cylinders firing at the exact same time. Everyone has to be on top of their game. Everyone has to be clicking for that team to work. And I've said it a bunch of times. If that doesn't happen, then they just fall apart. And this is exactly what's happening. It's kind of crazy to see. I didn't think it would be this bad. Of course, anything can happen in a 162 game season. They might turn it around and start winning. But boy, this is not the start that they wanted. And like you said, for Yankees fans, I'm sure they're calling for Aaron Boone to be fired. I'm sure they're calling for trades to happen and all kinds of crazy stuff. I don't know if anything will happen. But yeah, this is a terrible start.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen headlines that say like start spreading the booze, play on the old Frank Sinatra song.
Yeah.
But and I've seen other jokes going around that Jay Bruce actually signed with the New York Yankees in the offseason. He was brought in to kind of be like that veteran mentor to play first base, kind of be a DH every now and then. He actually is retired 2.5-3 weeks into this major league season. So the joke is that the Yankees are so bad that Jay Bruce doesn't even want to play there anymore. So they also recently acquired Rougned Odor, which was a shock to a lot of people because this is a guy that had a beard longer than mine for his entire career almost, and then now he's baby-faced and he looks like he's going to get carded every time he goes out to buy a beer. So it's pretty funny. That's one of the weirdest things in all of baseball, that the Yankees make people shave their face to play baseball for their team, but that's what they do. That's in their contract whenever they sign to be New York Yankee.
Yeah, I don't understand that at all. It's such a weird and old-timey thing to do. Like, they're the only team in most of American sports that I can think of that do something like that. And they also make you have your hair shorter than your collar or whatever.
It's like being in the military. You have facial hair regulations. You have haircut regulations. It's very strange.
Yeah. I don't get that. That's a weird old school thing to do. And I think in this day and age, that's something that people don't even care about. Like,
Well, and in a sport where they're trying to encourage players to have a personality and to be themselves, how are you going to be yourselves if you're told how you can cut your hair? You really can't.
yep,
You're limited.
yeah, I agree. I don't think anyone would think any less of the Yankees or anyone in that organization if people had beards. Like, that is just a complete non-issue these days. I guess maybe back in the day they wanted to be presentable and look like professionals or whatever, but it's a totally different world now. The culture is much different. People don't really care about men with beards. It's not the 20s anymore.
Yep, absolutely. I agree. But going back to those standings, Boston is up at the top. Tampa Bay is the next closest team, and they're just sitting at 500 at 8-8. This is a team that, has been very good pitching for years, and that's been their bread and butter is their pitching. They have a negative 13 run differential, which tells me their pitching ain't doing all that it's supposed to be doing. So is that going to be a problem for the Rays going down the stretch? Are they already starting to see the wheels fall off of that organization?
Yeah, 100%. I absolutely think that they relied very heavily on their pitching, and their pitching is in my opinion what got them to the World Series, and ultimately was the deciding factor between them winning and not. I mean, we've said it time and time again, but how the hell are you going to pull Blake Snell in that scenario? And now they don't even have Blake Snell anymore, so it's even worse. That's one of those teams where the metrics and the analytics and all that stuff have just gone way too far, and they care more about numbers than how their players are playing and what their players are capable of. Yeah, the World Series team that we saw last year is no more. I think they might maybe end up in third place, maybe. I don't know, but yeah, they're definitely not the same team they were last year.
Yeah, I agree. I think they are in trouble, and I think that the downward spiral of the Tampa Bay Rays is upon us. And that's something that I said in the preseason show. I said that I don't think they're going to be able to sustain that. Everybody says don't count out the Rays. I get it because they've been that pesky team that wants to hang around for years at this point. But I think their luck has finally ran out. And I think a big part of that is because Chaim Bloom is no longer in their front office. He's now in the front office of the Boston Red Sox, and he brought all of his knowledge along with him. And the Rays just don't have the budget to go out there and compete with these teams in the AL East, especially if they have that kind of mindset that Chaim Bloom brought to the table. So now he's got that insight, plus he's got a budget. I think the Red Sox are primed and ready to be the team to beat as soon as this year. And oh, by the way, they also have some several good studs waiting in the wings, ready to come up at any given moment.
Yeah, for sure. The Rays definitely had their time to shine, if you will, which they hardly even shined anyway. But
yeah,
nonetheless, the best days are behind them, I think, and I don't think they capitalized. Like you said, they don't have a lot of money to play with, which is why a guy like Chaim Bloom was good for that organization. But for one reason or another, they couldn't do enough to make him stick around. So that little experiment is over for him, I guess. And now I guess it's back to just being mediocre. Cause like you said, there's not many fans in the Rays stadium watching and cheering for the home team.
Yep. Nope. That's why I like to go to those games, because you can always find tickets. Let's talk about some of these power rankings. Of course, every week MLB drops the latest power rankings and all that stuff. And after week 1, when the Red Sox were on a 6-game win streak or whatever, they were ranked down in the 20s. I think they were actually 20th position. And a lot of Red Sox fans are like, what? This is a team that just won 6 straight games. They just swept the Orioles and the Rays, and you're going to rank them this low? Well, they adjusted fire and moved the Red Sox up 17 positions to number 3 overall, which is crazy. But if you think about it, according to this week's power rankings, the Dodgers, the Padres, and then the Red Sox, and then rounding out the rest of the 10, you've got the Reds, the Brewers, the Twins, the Braves, Mets, the Rays, and the White Sox. So out of those teams, The Red Sox went 3-1 against the number 6 Twins. They swept the number 9 Rays, and they split a 4-game series with the number 10 White Sox. So over this week and a half period, they've gone 8-3 versus top 10 teams. That is more than deserving to be in that top 5. And I mentioned that their run differential is second only to the Dodgers, who are number 1 on that list. I think they got it right for the most part, at least for the top 3. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree. And for my money, I think I would flip-flop the Padres and the Red Sox. I think the Padres were absolutely expected to be one of the best teams in all of MLB, not just the NL. And they're good. There's nothing wrong with that team. They've lost a few games to the Dodgers, which is expected. But I think the Red Sox are almost like a sleeper team this year. Those in the know, like you and like any other knowledgeable Red Sox fan, might have seen this coming. You know, this team is scary good, but I think they came out of nowhere and really started putting it on. So I would put them at the number 2 spot just because they're doing so well. But yeah, at least top 3 for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think maybe they do edge out the Padres just a little bit, especially if you look at what they did today to Giolito from the White Sox, a dude that pitched a no-hitter last year, and they roughed him up for 6 runs in the first inning, a couple more in the second inning, chased him before he even finished 2 full innings. They were just out there. They're hitting for average, they're hitting for power. And as the weather keeps getting warmer, the ball's going to keep flying for them. And this is a lineup that can hit top to bottom. Kike Hernandez hit a leadoff homer today. And then, you've got the power at the end of the lineup with Hunter Renfroe, Franchi Cordero, Bobby Dahlback, guys that can hit home runs 1 through 9. So you're never really out of a game. And if they're able to continue to get 5, 6, 7 innings out of starting pitchers like Nathan Eovaldi, Eduardo Rodriguez, Martin Perez has been pitching fairly well. The only hiccup really as far as the pitching has been Garrett Richards' first start. Since then, he's actually been halfway decent too, even though his ERA doesn't reflect it because he got roughed up early on. The bullpen has been fantastic. Whitlock, a dude that was picked up in the Rule 5 draft from the Yankees, has come over and he's got a goose egg for an ERA. He's been out there for several innings already. I'm not sure exactly how many after today. I know he pitched 2 or 3 innings today, and he's yet to give up a run. Sawamura, the guy that we signed from Korea, I believe it was, he's been pitching fairly well. He got into a little trouble yesterday, but he's done pretty well for the season. This is a team that Chaim Bloom went out. He bought several players that he thought would fit into this style of baseball, and they're all clicking. It's working well.
Yeah, he looks like a genius, doesn't he? Man, it's crazy to see. And I think you hit on something when you were saying that you need 5 to 6, if not more, innings from your starters. If you can get consistent 5, 6, 7 innings from your starters, then you're in a good spot. You know, it's those games where you have to go to your bullpen in the second inning, in the third inning, and you're already down by 4 or 5 runs. That's where you get into holes that are hard to get out of. And that's going to be a big thing throughout this whole year. Is can starting pitchers continue to do this kind of thing where they're getting up there in innings? Can the majority of starting pitchers get up to 200 innings this year off of a 60-game season where they maybe played, I don't know, 20 to 30 games? Yeah. That's a huge difference, especially for those players that are a little older. Maybe they're trying to fight off a minor injury or something. This long season is going to be pretty interesting, especially when it comes to starting pitchers, because that stamina, I'm sure, has been lost throughout the entire year last year. Spring training only can do so much for you. And I hope that it all works out. I don't know. It'll be very interesting to see come July, to see if there's any pitchers that go down with serious injuries or anything like that, just because the strength, the arm strength isn't there, the stamina is not there, and they just can't keep up with the heavy tax that is an actual full 162 season.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Well, it's something that we'll definitely have to keep an eye on as the season progresses, because it is very likely that we will see some injuries start to pop up. Not that we wish them on anybody, but it is likely. To go back to my point on Garrett Whitlock, he has pitched 9 innings so far in this young season. He's recorded 11 strikeouts and has a 0.00 ERA. Dude's balling, and he was picked up from the Yankees for free. So you know they've got to be kicking themselves right now.
Yeah, that's one of those deals that you definitely want to have back. But boy, that 0 ERA, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So we already got our top 3 established, that Dodgers, Padres, and Red Sox, with Red Sox and Padres being kind of interchangeable at that 2 and 3 spot. Who do you have in the 4-5 just to round out your top 5?
I've got number 4 as the Reds. We've touched on them a little bit before. They're on a hot streak, and I don't imagine that's going to last very long. But for what it's worth, at this point in the season, they're off to a really good start. They can hit home runs. Even Joey Votto has been hitting several home runs. They're doing decent right now. I expect that number to kind of change here in a little bit. But for what it's worth, week by week, they're doing extremely well right now. And in the number 5 spot, I've got the Royals, which again, I think that's going to change here pretty soon. But you got to give credit where credit's due for their start. They've been off to a very good start. I can't imagine that's going to last much longer either. But who knows? I mean, I've imagined that at least the Twins or the White Sox would have been able to top the Royals, but that's not the case. So.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the Royals, because I actually have the White Sox in my top 5. I've got them coming in at 5, even though they are sitting at 8 and 9 after today's game, just below the 500 mark. They're 2.5 games back from the Royals, but I think that team is just overall a better team than what the Royals are. I don't think the Royals will be sustainable in the long term, so I think we'll see them start to drop pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And then I also think that the Angels deserve a spot up in the top 5 right now for what they've done this so far this season. I think they're one of the hot teams out there, and the fact that they've gone out there and they've been able to ball speaks volumes. And I think that they have a more sustainable power lineup than the Seattle Mariners, who are, I guess, statistically in first place over them right now, only by half a game, but it is what it is.
Right. Yeah. These early rankings are kind of weird, just because, stuff is going to change. I mean, the Mariners are definitely going to fall a few times. And you mentioned that the stats were, the Red Sox were in like 20th place or whatever, and they had the Yankees at like 3rd or something stupid. And you and I had talked about it, that like, how can you put a team that's lost X amount of games up there so high? And I think that was just one of those things that MLB is obviously always going to ride that Yankees huge fandom. If the Yankees are doing well, baseball's doing well, just because they're such a huge team and they have a shit ton of bandwagon fans. But I think that's clearly not happening at the moment, and I think they've obviously kind of corrected some of that. But it's just so funny to see like the huge drastic differences of week by week from these MLB rankings. Like, they got roasted by Red Sox fans for throwing them down there so bad, and they had to make up for it.
Yeah, good point. Carabas actually mentioned on one of his podcasts that the only thing that was saving them was the fact that they were the New York Yankees. If they went by the name the Louisiana Balloons, they would not be ranked at that level that they were ranked at, because nobody would care at that point. Yep. And they did drop from the 3rd spot in the first week power rankings down to 11 this week. And another huge drop was the Astros dropped from 5th down to 12th.
Yeah, and I agree with those. If not a little bit farther. I think the Yankees definitely have some potential. They have the makings for a good team, but they just can't bring it all together all at the same time. For whatever reason, they've never been able to fix Stanton and Judge's issues where they get injured. And if nothing changes, then I expect them to get injured again and miss chunks of the season every now and then. And that's just going to hurt you because those two bats are extremely relied on.
Yeah, absolutely. And whenever they're not in the lineup, it's certainly noticeable. Let's clear the bases, Zach. Let's talk about some other stuff. We covered our power rankings. We covered the standings. This week, the Jacksonville Jags fans made it known that Trevor Lawrence was their guy by collecting over $30,000 to buy him and his new wife wedding gifts and donate to Lawrence's preferred charities. Lawrence actually responded and thanked the Jags fans on his personal Twitter account and said that he's excited to be part of their community soon. So pretty much everything's done except for the draft day, which happens in 10 days from today. And it looks like Trevor Lawrence is on his way to Duval.
Yeah. And I think this was just one of those things that everyone saw coming. Basically, whoever gets that number one pick is going to end up with Trevor Lawrence. I definitely didn't think that it would be the Jags. I kind of expected the Jets to fall to that number one spot again. They didn't. And now Jacksonville gets that spot. I wonder now what Trevor Lawrence is going to be able to do with that team.
It will be interesting. They have a pretty exciting young offense. It'll be interesting to see what they can do with a marquee quarterback like Trevor Lawrence. I do know that they're going to need to build a line to protect him because that was ultimately what the downfall was with Nick Foles, and he got injured right off the bat because he got sacked in his first drive with the Jags, and Gardner Minshew clearly couldn't stay healthy either. So that's been an issue for them, not being able to protect their quarterback. So that's something that they're going to definitely have to work on going forward.
Yeah, for sure. And that's something that you see across the league. If teams don't have a good offensive line, then it all just starts falling apart. Just look at the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, for example. They had all those injuries, and then, of course, a few players opted out, and it really showed. Mahomes had to run for his life and could barely do it. If this young kid doesn't have the opportunity to sit in the pocket and find an open receiver, it's going to be hard for him because these defenses are that much better than the colleges that he faced.
Good point, kid. Yep. Speaking of guys that couldn't sit back in the pocket very long, Alex Smith, who suffered a horrific injury a couple years ago, came back and was the 2020 Comeback Player of the Year, has officially retired from the National Football League. Was that a shock to you when it was announced earlier today?
No, if you were to ask me, I probably would have said that he'll probably find a spot as a backup on some sort of team, because obviously the Washington football team let him go, which makes sense. He's no one's really future quarterback, but I kind of thought he would maybe fill a role as like a mentor, like, hey, you can teach a young guy some stuff and tell him what to look out for. But I guess he has decided to put that all behind him and move on. And I think he definitely can hang his hat on being one of the absolute best comeback players we've seen ever.
Yeah.
That injury is nothing to scoff at. It was horrific. And for him to come back and do as well as he did with the no-name team is pretty impressive. So I hope he keeps his head held up high, because he had a real, all things considered, pretty good career. Of course, he was with the 49ers for a while and the Chiefs. Never really made anything happen too big, but for what it's worth, he had a decent career. I mean, 16 years in the NFL is nothing to scoff at.
No, not at all. And I didn't realize that he had been in the league that long. Whenever I saw that it was announced, I was like, wow, really? He's been in that long? But it's true. He's been in, and he's been balling the entire time. So good on him, and I wish him luck. It was mentioned, though, that and Smith said it himself, that he was considering linking back up with his former coach from Utah, Urban Meyer, here in Jacksonville. And he had played the idea, of potentially coming in to be that mentor for Trevor Lawrence. And I think that would have been huge for somebody like Trevor to have Alex Smith in his back pocket. Ultimately, he decided against that. And another guy that tried to snag him was Andy Reid. another former coach that knew his work ethic, knew the type of guy that he was, and wanted him to come in to be the backup there in Kansas City. So he had options. It's not like he wasn't given opportunities. He decided that this was what was best for him and best for his family. Do you see a future for Alex Smith on TV or on the sidelines somewhere?
Yeah, I think he's probably going to at least give it a go. And I wonder if that kind of played into his decision. You know, like maybe one of these networks came and said, "Hey, we're definitely willing to put you on whatever show." And maybe that might have been the deciding factor to say, you know what, I don't have to play another year. I can get a paycheck somewhere else. So we might end up seeing him on one of these networks. If he can do it well, then more power to him. You know, it's kind of funny because a lot of the players that retire and then go to that are either hit or miss. You know, there's some guys kind of like Jason Witten who did it. Whether or not he was good or bad at it is, I guess, maybe up for debate. He definitely wasn't one of the best. Otherwise, he probably still would be doing it. And he
wasn't good. Let's be honest.
He ultimately had to, go and find another means of employment. And you never really know until they step into that booth or step behind that microphone and start actually doing it.
Yeah, no, I know we have a lot of fans that are Elizabethton High School alum and current students, and I know Jason Witten is kind of idolized at that school. His brother is the head football coach of the 2-time defending state champ Cyclone football team, but he was not good. He was not good on Monday Night Football, and his toupee piece was even worse. So I'm glad that he decided to go back to play football, even if it was for just a couple seasons, and now he's again retired. But I think if he's ever brought back to be an analyst of any sort, it should be like just a pregame analyst, like something like what Strahan does. Just bring him on for the pregame show, let him joke and cut up with the other former football players and coaches, and then send him to eat pizza.
Right. Yeah.
He doesn't need to be calling a game.
Yeah.
MLB The Show comes out tomorrow. How stoked are you?
I'm very excited. I haven't played an MLB game since I think 19.
Mm-hmm.
I think 19 ended up being free on the PlayStation Store for a little bit, and I think you and I picked it up and played it. That was basically just the same old game with a new roster. But I'm definitely looking forward to the show 21. Not only is it coming to Xbox, but we're getting it with Game Pass, so you don't have to drop another $60 on the game. And I think there's going to be some changes to the game that are going to be fun to play with.
Yeah, I know tomorrow before I leave for work, I'm going to set my Xbox up to go ahead and get that download going so that it'll be ready for me when I get home from work. I'm super excited about that. You think we can get a live stream or something going, Zach? You know, you've not really been doing the video game episodes here lately. You were on it for a little bit, doing some streams and trying to do some video game reviews, but it's been a while.
Yeah,
think we can get that going for the people.
We can absolutely make that happen. I don't know how many people will watch, but it'll be out there for you to consume if you want to. And I definitely think we're gonna absolutely bring in maybe Brandon Mateer, who's been on the show a few times, maybe anyone else that wants to chime in about the game and do a full-fledged, whole episode for the show 21. It's definitely one of those games that you and I have been looking forward to, which are perfect for having a review. So if you're looking forward to that, we can definitely make that happen.
Cool. Yeah. I do want to try to push out some more video game streaming. I know you play video games a lot more than I do. So let's try to get that going again. It's summertime. People are sitting at home with not much else to do. Let's try to give them some content to watch. Let them watch you play some video games and hook it up to where you can actually talk to them while you're playing. That would be pretty cool. Yeah. I see streamers all the time that are on there just playing games and talking to the people that are watching them. And it's actually pretty engaging whenever they are participating in the conversation while they're playing the game. It's pretty cool to see. I know Ian's pretty good at that.
Yeah, he's great at it. And it's such a weird medium because for my money, I'm not a huge fan of watching people play video games. I always fight to not try to think of what I would do if I were playing the game and just try to enjoy it. But I mean, I'm in the minority. I mean, people love Twitch and YouTube and all that stuff. I mean, it's just a huge market of people playing video games, and it's not necessarily just the absolute best people in the world. It's like you said, people that have a good community and can interact and stuff like that. And the donation thing, and like, you know, you can get shout outs or whatever. It's a whole crazy, weird, kind of new way of consuming a media that is only a few years old.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the replayability of games goes up because you can go back and, like Ian does, he plays games that he played growing up when he was a kid, and people watch it for the nostalgia factor. And he's made several friends and fans just because they're like, oh man, I want to watch this guy play Mario 3, you know, whatever. So
Right. Yep.
it's a cool thing. And I think we started to build a pretty good little following, and then we just stopped doing it for whatever reason. So let's get our Nest gaming going again.
Sure.
Cool deal. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching along and for joining us tonight. It's been a lot of fun talking about the standings and the rankings and stuff. I figure we'll do this a couple times throughout the MLB season. Maybe not every week, obviously, because that would get pretty boring, but to do it once a month or something, just to kind of touch base with where everybody's at and kind of, you know, figure out what's going on out there around the league. And of course, we'll also have our episodes where we focus on our specific teams, the Cardinals and the Red Sox, and we'll be focusing on some NFL draft coming up pretty soon. So stick around and stay tuned. We'll see you guys back here next week, next Monday night, and peace.